Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to a wonderful Thursday here in Breton. Sorry, I'm still under the weather a little bit, so please put up with my little sniffles. I'll be all right. But thank you for joining us today. Oh boy, this show is starting to really pull in some powerhouse guests, like people who are not just well known in their communities or for their efforts, but people who are actually making strong changes on the ground, or at least trying to. So I'm really proud to bring to you guys Peter McIsaac. He's come back, and along with Paul Westhaver. And what I'm trying to get at is these two gentlemen, they started a movement, an independent movement over in Nova Scotia, and they're fighting hard all the way to the point where they caught the attention of the Nova Scotia Elections Authority, and they're actually trying to come after them. Okay, so here in Alberta, this is something we see a lot of. We see a lot of grassroots efforts fighting really hard, and an example of that is Take Back Alberta. Marco Van Hugenbos, David Parker started that. David is still around. And the same thing's happening here. Elections Alberta is going after that group. Why? Because they're effective. They're actually getting people together. Their communities are growing. Their messages are being heard, and they're being supported. What are they fighting for? Well, the party's over. They want to have independent candidates. Talking my breakfast here. I love when they talk like this. Yes, I did join the PPC party. I joined them because an independent candidate can be independent within the PPC and still get some things done. But ultimately, I do absolutely align with the idea of independent candidates coast to coast, because that's how we're going to get some direct representation, and we're going to be closer to a republic. These are all things I'm really excited about heading towards. But getting back to the powerhouses, these gentlemen, they're in the courts. They're dealing with the courts in Nova Scotia in order to do what? Possibly to overturn the election that we just saw there. Fight back and also defend themselves, because they're a grassroots effort trying to encourage independent candidates in a system that doesn't do that. And here's what the system's doing: trying to stop them. Look, I'm not joking when I tell you, if you look at Elections Canada, you look on the provincial levels as well, it's not independent candidate friendly. Same thing with media, just so you know. Media landscape is independent friendly by design. Like in Alberta, the laws around independent media in the courts is very restrictive. I'm still fighting for it. It's all over the place. If you're an independent, the system's against you. And these gentlemen are identifying the cracks in the armor, and then they're trying to make this work. But they're also having a sword put back onto them, and they need to pull up a shield. So without further ado, let me go ahead and bring in #1 best-selling Amazon author, Peter McIsaac. Good morning,
Thanks for
Peter.
having me, Jason.
It's my pleasure. And then let's go ahead and bring in your partner of crime, Paul Westhaver. Good morning, Paul. How are you?
It might be crime. It might be considered crime. Thank you.
Stomping out crime, guys.
Yeah, we're going to find out. We're going to need some decisions, some judicial reviews, maybe some appeals. We might be at this for a while. My gosh, I'm impressed. You gentlemen have been coming on the show for over a year now. And each time we come on, you're taking one more step closer to actually achieving what you're talking about: independent candidates over on the East Coast. So let's start with the best-selling author, Amazon best-selling author, Peter. Let's go ahead and introduce your book. We'll get that link out there. And how have things been the last 4 or 5 months since we last saw you?
Well, thanks for getting us on again, Jason. An awful lot has happened. One of the things, I did get that book out, and I was shocked. I sent it out to somebody, and he got back and said, "Congrats, it's a bestseller." And I was shocked. I was hoping to sell 100 copies of a book, because it's totally politically incorrect, and it's a perfect Christmas gift for any of your redneck pals. And there's a trigger warning comes with the book. I wouldn't recommend giving that to any of your liberal friends, because after they read that book, they might not be your friend anymore.
Oh, fair enough.
Well,
I'd love to get a copy. And I'd love to get a copy of it too.
And it's drawn a lot of heat too, because I was highly, highly critical of our provincial government, rightly so, and the federal government, rightly so. And I basically call a spade, and it's just a good old time folksy book. And if you don't like it, you're not getting a refund. That's just basic business. Just saying. But you know what? We got a 5-star review on it, and everybody loves it. So, anyways, lots going on. In the back of that book, why I put that out initially, Jason, was our plan on what we wanted to do with the independent movement is spelled out completely at the back of the book. And everything in the book leads up to the point of there is a solution, like most of us are complaining. So between Paul and I, we had come up with the fact that we actually have a solution. So I put that in the book, fully expecting to, at the time, I was expected to be censored, removed from all platforms. But if that book was out there, hopefully people would be able to have it. and read exactly what we're up to. So it's spelled out in black and white. If you want to know how to fix the problem, buy that book, and it tells you in there specifically what we're doing. But it's a David and Goliath story, because now we're up against Goliath, but Goliath habitually overestimates himself. And that's why all it took was one rock in the right place to end him. And what we're doing down here is basically the same thing. Is we found the chinks in the armor, and Paul's an engineer. He's figured out how to put pressure in the cracks. And our long-term goal is to see our independent movement come to fruition. And we'll see what comes out of the court system now, but down the road in the next election, we hope to have all the legislation changed so that independence for the first time in Nova Scotia will be on equal footing.
Mm-hmm. No, and that's something I'm looking forward to, because like I said in my intro, it's not equal footing. It's actually in legislation. It's difficult, especially around finances, how you fund yourself, the rules that you have to live by. It's very difficult as an independent. Paul, he says you're going to apply some pressure in the kinks in the armor. And Achilles had a heel, and of course Goliath had a forehead. So it does only take the right shot at the right place, and you can take this down. Have you found that Achilles heel or that shot in the forehead yet?
Yeah, the Achilles heel is the arrogance of people in their absolute dismissal of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That's the chink in the armor. They just do what they want, and they don't really look at Section 52. Mm-hmm. Section 52 of the Charter is a supremacy clause that says, you got to, if you have legislation in a province that contravenes the principles that are laid out in the Charter, then that law is no longer valid. Charter wins. That's right. So our position is rather clear. We think we had a farce election, and I think it's not legitimate. I actually believe that the election that had just taken place in Nova Scotia is so far from legitimate that I was willing to raise this issue in court. Okay. With Peter and a number of other people who tried to participate in the election and were denied a place on the ballot. And they were denied a place on the ballot for largely technical reasons on its face, but really there is an architectural, as you were saying, reason for to keep independents from participating in a meaningful role in the election. So it's layers and layers and layers on this onion, and it's an onion that's been growing since Joseph Howe. I don't know if you know who Joseph Howe is. Well, he's one of the thought leaders, very famous man. They have a statue of him next to the legislature in Halifax. And he was very clear in his rebellion against corporate and elite family interests steering the future of Nova Scotia. And lots of promises were made to do something about that. But here we are a couple hundred years later, and it's still going on. So we're just sort of taking up that mantle that he was carrying, and we're absolutely determined to have our day and have our arguments heard by the Supreme Court judge, which is happening right now. We're in the courtroom with Judge Patrick Murray in the Supreme Court of Nova Scotia.
Wow, I'm so impressed by that. Peter, when you were starting to write your book, how did that play into this? So the content of your book and then your efforts now, are they related or are they separate subjects?
I started writing the book about 6 years ago, to be honest with you. And I grew up on a military basis till I was 11, but I grew up in a very staunch conservative family. And I was always right-leaning. And I always believed that government should stay out of our way as much as possible, which is diametrically opposed to the left's view of the world. So basically, I grew up down here. I spent most of my time down on the east coast of Canada in rural living. And in the book, I talk about how conservatives are made. Now, I need to straighten that out. I'm a conservative by nature, but the party system's broken, and I can no longer be involved in the party system because I was involved both provincially in the party system, and then I was the president actually of a federal electoral district association for a number of years. And then I pointed out some corruption, and that got me basically suspended, kicked out of the parties. So I said, okay, the party system's broken. I've got a long history of law enforcement. I was a provincial game warden for 29 years here in Nova Scotia. And so I saw corruption inside the system from the day I began. Matter of fact, day one. And so everything in the book leads up to my becoming basically awake, not woke. Right. Because I've watched what wokeism did beginning in the 90s to destroy every level of government at the federal, provincial, and municipal levels. And that seeped into every facet of society to the point that now ridiculous seems to be the norm. And there's zero meritocracy. Everywhere I look, I see people in positions of management that shouldn't be there. So everything in the book, it's basically a novel. It's designed because it's a true story and kind of a biography. It's a true story of how anybody being exposed to the information that I was exposed to would come to most of the same conclusions. And there's a ton of data in there. I mean, there really is a lot of research put into that book. And I never finished the book until I met Paul. And then Paul come up with the idea of independent Nova Scotia, because basically it was going to be a book about an old redneck down here on the East Coast complaining. And I've got enough people that have told me in the past either put up or shut up. So I actually ran for politics in 2012 when I retired from Department of Natural Resources. And I had a good showing, but I lost. And I said, well, inside the party, you can fix things. Well, if you've been involved in any of this at all, Jason, you know that that's categorically not true. Because no matter how well-intentioned you are, the day that you're elected, you're told to sit down, shut up, and do what you're told. And if you work inside the government at any level, it's the same thing. Sit down, shut up, and you get a paycheck every second Thursday. And so what people do is they just conform and get stuff done. And I was brought up to question everything. And my dad was a military guy, and he questioned stuff, but he was entrenched with military belief systems. And he took some of them to the grave with him. And so now I realize because of that, how difficult it is to break through the conformity that we've all been brainwashed to accept over our lifetime. So that book will help people break through that.
Okay, great. So you're a very independent person. You call yourself a conservative. You grew up that way. But Paul, I'm actually going to throw another term out there that's been floating around a lot out here in Alberta. And there's a reason why I'm asking you this. Would you consider yourself Republican? Would you consider yourself along those lines too? Because that's a term we don't hear a lot in Canada, but it really means representing the people, which is what an independent really is. So would you consider yourself ideologically a Republican?
I spent a long time living in the United States, and it's rather different than Canada. I'm a Canadian citizen, but for lots of reasons I was living in the United States. Largely, I went there as a reaction to the Meech Lake Accord.
Right.
Well, Quebec just threw a hammer into my life. Here I am trying to prosper in this country, and you have Quebec deciding it's just going to do its thing and just wreck the economy, and the dollar collapsed. It was just brutal, right? So that was that. So my first opportunity, I started working in the United States, which ended up being probably the best decision of my life. Except being married. That was the best decision.
Good catch.
Right. So I was exposed to the American civil procedures, the way they handle government, which is rather different. But there is something different in the American ethos, right? A lot of Canadians just hate Americans because they just hate Americans, right? They're just bigots. And I hear it all the time, especially when I'm driving around with one of my cars that have U.S. plates on them. Right, I hear it firsthand. They think I'm American, but I'm not. I'm a Canadian. I love Canada, and the Canadians are missing out on an opportunity to be more directly involved in the process of their own governance. We don't vote for our leader, Justin Trudeau. We didn't vote for him. Mm-hmm. We voted for a party official, and the party put that guy in, right? And we know what he is. That guy's a mess. And but in the United States, they fight about everything. You know, they have these civil initiatives, referendums, and things that are on the ballot. We're going to have a white line down the middle of the road. No, it's going to be a yellow line. They fight about everything, and it's messy. But they get their own ideas represented in their own societies, in their own communities, and they have direct influence on that. And I love that. It's messy. Here, things happen, and you don't know why they're happening. You don't know who's running the show. Geez, we don't even have school boards here in Nova Scotia anymore. I'm not kidding. Like, parents aren't involved, or they're institutionally disinvolved from participating in the schools. So if to answer that question, am I a Republican? Well, what's a republic? You know, I would say that I am in favor of more direct involvement at every single layer of governance. Governance in the municipalities, in our local communities, governance provincially, and governance federally, and even beyond that. If there's stuff that's going on in the world sphere, like through the UN, I think Canadians need to be directly involved in making those decisions and not laying it off on some guy who's got his own plans for our future. So I think that's pretty clear, and I think those sentiments are echoed to the majority of Canadians, Nova Scotians in particular. But they're just so unaware of how things happen that they don't know that, you know, the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. It really is. If you want to call it republicanism, I'm fine with that. I wouldn't qualify myself as revolutionary, but I would say that Joseph Howe was trying to do this years ago, and we're just continuing on with that effort. We want to see the people of Nova Scotia more directly involved in every aspect of their own governance, and that's painful because that means that they have to work hard, think hard, and participate, become informed, and that may require changing culture, which is why what we're doing really isn't a political movement. This is an educational movement, and we're infecting the people of Nova Scotia with an idea that's floating around and seizing people, and that is, yes, you can participate in your own governance. You can, and the government is furiously trying to prevent that from happening. Your own government hates you. The government of Nova Scotia hates the people of Nova Scotia, which is why they are bringing people in from all over the world to fill your shoes, because they despise the people of Nova Scotia. They do. They don't want them involved in the election process. They don't want them involved in making any decisions for themselves. They're getting their orders from outside the country through these large investment firms, and they want to make sure that the people of Nova Scotia bend over and take it. That's what's going on.
Wow.
So,
and I do not disagree. And we're having some struggles here in Alberta, too. I'm not sure if you noticed, because you guys are very busy in Nova Scotia. But in Alberta, Danielle Smith is our premier, and she promised to bring in some protections around human rights. While she was running, she said, I'm going to modify the Human Rights Code of Alberta, because we actually have one on an Alberta level.
Yeah.
And what actually happened was she didn't touch it. A couple years later, she modifies the Alberta Bill of Rights. If you've been paying attention, she had the words demonstrably justified added and reasonable limits added to the Alberta Bill of Rights, which wasn't there before. This was against protest of Brian Peckford, who said that was absolutely outrageous. That was against a protest of the JCCF, who actually said, don't make that mistake twice. That was against a protest of a group called the Black Hats, which are members of the party who was bringing forward an actual Bill of Rights that would enshrine and protect our rights here in Alberta. And that was also against a protest of 91.5% of the members who voted in favor of the Black Hat Bill of Rights at the AGM just a couple months ago. And then what we actually saw happen, which is the most scary part, was within 5 weeks from start to finish, it got royal assent, this amendment, which totally destroyed the Alberta Bill of Rights. I'm laying down this foundation to you because what has happened now as a result of that is a push for provincial constitution. So within the Constitution of Canada, each province is permitted to make its own constitution. And that constitution then guides the governance of that province and provides the tools of direct democracy and allows the people to be far more involved in the process. For example, recall, term limits, elected officials, high-ranking officials are elected, things like that.
Yep.
Every state has a constitution. No province in Canada has one, even though it's built into our framework. You don't have to tear the system down. It's already in. We're allowed to do this. It's part of it. And using that section you talked about, I think you said 53, it just means that the provincial constitution cannot be supreme to the Canadian Constitution or the monarch. As long as you're within that framework, you're good to go. And that includes dropping the monarchy's name. We don't have to have the King's Bench. We can have a superior court. That means getting rid of the pomp and pageantry that doesn't need to be there. It's just celebratory or traditional. We can get rid of it. And we can be more republic-like. I don't understand why Canadians haven't been asking for this, especially like Quebec. Why didn't Quebec go down that road? Because you can. You just have to pass it. So this is something that's really caught fire, like wildfire here in Alberta. Why don't we sit down and create a constitution that governs us with the people's involvement and put it in place? There's nothing stopping us other than the will and the vote. So, Peter, I'm going to come to you next. First, were you aware that the Canadian Constitution provides a framework that the provinces can declare their own constitution and work and live within it? Were you aware of that? And now that you are, or maybe you were before, what are your thoughts about pushing that? Because Alberta has really picked up that particular message.
Well, one of the things that we wanted to do, Jason, was with enough independence to control the legislature. By the way, our long-term goal was to solve a problem exactly what just happened in BC. I'll give you an example. Out in BC, if they had 4 independents elected, they would now control the government. They would have complete control of the legislature.
Yeah, they'd have the balance of power.
They'd have the balance of power. So down here, what ended up happening is we only had, just a little education background for your viewers, Nova Scotia only has 1.1 million people. Mm-hmm. And out of that population, we only got a 44% voter turnout in this last election. 56% of us, down 10% from the last election, decided not to turn out to vote because they saw the party system being hopeless. They weren't being represented. So one of the things that we had on our list was if we had enough independence and the government was close, we would be able to control the legislature and start tabling issues like you just mentioned. But here's what's happened, Jason, is when Tim Houston, the current premier who just won this election, that we're claiming is unjust, one of his very first piece of legislation that he passed was a fixed election date for mid-July next year. That was his very first, and he ranted and railed on that, and it had to be done, and he had been misdone by because they couldn't plan, and he said, this is all coming to an end. So what happened down here in Nova Scotia, there was a number of things led to him calling an early election. One of them was we were nipping hard at their heels. Our goal was we have 55 ridings down here, and we wanted to run 55. Not we wanted to run, but we wanted to get communities to select amongst their own people 55 good, solid candidates to run. And the goal was to get enough of them elected to be able to control the legislature. And if that would have been the case, what you're bringing up about a constitution, that's something that we would have been able to do. But I can 100% guarantee you right now, the guy who just broke his own law, his very first law to run an election, that's the last thing that he wants. He wants full and total control of power, and now he has it. And there's one other thing that people need to realize is why would a premier with 8 months left with a majority claim that he needed a mandate? Well, he already has a mandate. So that story's gone out the window. That's just another falsehood. But what happened was back in May, we had a by-election down here, and we had an independent candidate try to run in that election. And Elections Nova Scotia conspired for 6 days nonstop to keep that man's name off the ballot. They did not want an independent candidate running in that election because of the gains we were making from one end of the province to the other. So we're confident that charter challenge, the charter challenge that we're going to engage in, will win. But here's what happened. The guy's name's Bobby Lee Dillman. He was a good old boy, and he had a solid chance of making inroads down in that riding. So he filed a formal complaint with our head of criminal prosecutions, who's obligated to look into requests where there's impropriety in an election. Well, after a week, he didn't get a response. So then a letter went to our Minister of Justice, Barb Adams, saying you have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure this election takes place. Well, she didn't respond, but the Premier responded, because less than 10 days later, he broke his own legislation and called an election, which made that investigation, it's now moot. Right? There's
Right.
no way this
Okay.
government is going to move ahead with this investigation. So the government did two things. One, they wanted to squash that criminal investigation. The fact of the charter violation, though, will pass the moot tests. They're not going to be able to declare that moot, and so they couldn't have that prosecution or that investigation come out in the press. They wouldn't have been able to hide it, because one of the remedies the man was asking for 3 days prior to the election, he received a phone call from Elections Nova Scotia saying, well, how can we fix this mess? And he said, well, you're going to have to declare the by-election invalid. We're going to have to go back to election, and the commissioner and the CFO who are involved in straight up and keeping me off the ballot, they need to be removed from their positions. Well, one of the people in that online meeting jumped up, started screaming at the camera, and the feed got cut. And 3 days later, the Premier down here went to an election. He was supposed to go Friday. They had that meeting on Thursday trying to resolve the issue. And when they couldn't resolve it, they went, okay, how are we going to deal with this? Well, we're going to have to break our own legislation. And so that's exactly what he did. So basically what he proved is his word. How much is a penny worth? Now, it's not even worth a penny anymore, but it's worth about what our Premier's word is worth. Absolutely nothing. And I know the guy. I used to fish with him. His word means nothing. So whatever he says, and here's the thing. So now we have hundreds of people that are coming to us saying, okay, is there a possibility there was any foreign interference in this election? Much like Sam Cooper has proven there's been interference at the federal level and out in the BC government election. So we have hundreds of people calling us now saying, is there a chance that there was any foreign election down here in Nova Scotia? And I've got a message into Sam Cooper now. I'm hoping to hear back from him, because I would like him to do a deep dive into potential gerrymandering somewhere inside our election system.
Okay, so Paul, I'm going to come to you as the engineer. First, one of the things that Peter said that resonated with me was the Premier said he was looking for a mandate. That's why he went and did this election. Whether that's true or not, who knows? But my point is, that's how they treat us. We only hear from you during the election. We only want to hear from you during the election. That's what mandate to him means. What do the people want? And he only listens once in a while during the election. And that's where direct democracy or republic changes things, because they could be recalled and other things could happen. So they're always having to pay attention to what the people say. For example, inquiries. Inquiries is something that you have to get the government support to do. And if you wanted to have foreign interference inquiry to see what happened with your election, you actually need them to support that. So they have to agree to be looked at. So that's perverted, and that shouldn't be the case. And also with direct democracy, one of the things you can do is say no dual citizenship in high-ranking officials. You can make that part of your constitution. So you have to make your choice. If you want to become a public servant of the province or the country, you have to decide where your loyalty lies on a citizenship level. These are the kind of things that Canadians are not aware of that we can do. And you don't need a revolt. You don't need to tear down the system. This is already available. We just haven't executed. So as we're hearing Peter lay this out, this is where direct democracy could have actually saved you. You would have been able to look in the inquiry, no dual citizenships. If they're not doing the things right, there could be recall, and you can actually do this without elections. You're an engineer, so we were listening to the problems, looking for solutions. Is this something that might be a low-hanging fruit with 1 million people in Nova Scotia coming together to be maybe one of the first provinces to enact a constitution?
This is an interesting dilemma, and most people suffer it. You know the old story, the horses run out of the barn. What's the point of closing the gates, right? Well, in our case, there's more horses in the barn. So we needed the dam. Let's try another metaphor. You know, I'm often brought in professionally to look in technical problems and say, fix this, fix that, whatever, as a technical expert. And sometimes I can see the future. I can predict, where the faults are going to come. And in this case, I saw it coming. And but people don't see it, right? So they have to experience the pain in order to understand that there's a problem. So I was kind of happy that the assholes that did what just happened did what they did, because it was very tough for us to make the case that this is a real problem without the uniform actions that were taken against the independent candidates. There was something around, I don't have the exact number. I did a FOI pop to find that out, but I haven't gotten that back yet. But around 20 independents ran, followed the rules as they understood it as written, and they're all denied a place on the ballot. I want the people of Canada to hear that again. Yeah. 20 independents filed their paperwork to run, to participate in a meaningful way in an election. And in so doing, they would have provided another option for the electorate to consider. And they may not have even voted for them, but at least they'll say, oh, well, I got a real choice here. I can vote for somebody from the NDP. I can vote for the communists. And there's this fellow here that's an independent. And they were denied that. They were denied the ability to do that. Uniformly, the independent candidates, those who registered as independent first, were all denied a place on the ballot. 19 people in a province when there's only 55 districts. Now, there were a few independents that were in there. Two of them were formerly members of another party, and the party got deregistered, so they were registered already, so they were allowed to run. So the circumstances were different. But that's what happened. In Nova Scotia, 19, 20, 18, something like that, people were kept off the ballot. They were kept off the ballot because of intricate regulations that they just created. And they created when Tim Houston was sitting in the legislature and voting for those measures. So we have institutional perversion of the people's will. We do. And I mean, there's a million other things that are wrong with it. But that's the most fundamental problem. The problem is that 19 people that I know of wanted to get on the ballot and tried really hard to do that. Returning officers said, and we documented it, this is wrong. You should be on the ballot, quote, quote, quote. And the head honchos in Elections Nova Scotia, who got their marching orders from God knows who, decided that that wasn't going to happen. And that's what happened. And we documented it all. We waited for it to happen, and we got them. Their hands were in the cookie jar. We caught the government of Nova Scotia, the Elections Nova Scotia, actively participating in a tortured interpretation of the Elections Act that prevented 19 people from being on the ballot. 19, that's not just one accident. Mm-hmm. That's an institutional coordinated effort to make it happen. It was a conspiracy to keep people off the ballot. Wow. That happened in Canada. This isn't Nicaragua. This is Canada. And we got 11 Chinese Communist Party members identified working in the federal government. What's going on in our country? We're being taken over by elites and taken over by the Chinese Communist Party through serious infiltration. Now, there's been a lot of laws changed in the federal system. Do you think Poilievre is going to roll back any of them? No, he's not. The same thing's going on in Nova Scotia. You get a supermajority now, and you have Tim Houston's got what he wanted. He kept all these people off the ballot. The dissenting voices exist in places like this now because they're not represented in the legislature. He's going to do what he wants. What's the mandate? What's that? That's a nebulous term. Mandate for what? He didn't ask the people of Nova Scotia if they wanted mass migration 3.5 years ago when he got elected in the first place. And then all of a sudden, the roads get destroyed, apartment buildings are going up everywhere, and these people are being brought in with no place to live, and the roads are clogged, and now they're reversing the whole thing federally. Like it was a bad idea, because it was a bad idea. Did they have a mandate to do that? They never told the people of Nova Scotia that you're going to wreck everything. And now he's saying, well, I have a mandate. You have a mandate for what, you stupid shit? You didn't tell, you're not tell. Listen, in 4 years, everybody's going to say, well, we never asked for that. No, but he's carping. He's got a mandate to do more of what his bosses are telling him to do. These venture capital funds, BlackRock, the Liberal Party, because he's a liberal, he's not a conservative, and he's going to do it because there's no checks and balances in Nova Scotia. There isn't. And they conspired to keep the only people, the independent people from these disparate communities of Nova Scotia off the ballot as a mechanism to shut down any kind of inhibition on this wave of crap that's about to hit us. And I hope he just goes for it. I really do.
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that you guys are probably the right group to do this and get things started. So, Peter, I want to come to you now. As you sent us a photograph. And by the way, Paul, thank you very much for that passion. You would fit well in Alberta because you sound exactly like all my neighbors right now, because it's exactly how we sound out here, too.
I might get run out of here.
Well, there's a place for you to go, but Canada started in the east, so you guys are right where we need to be if we're going to make major change or do some major changes here. So, Peter, what we got here is a picture, and, you know, this is a lovely group of people. I know some of these people here. You want to explain to us what this is, where you are, and why you are all together?
Well, you know what? Paul could do a better job at that, but that's outside the Supreme Court. We had just left our first appearance last Friday in Port Hawkesbury. And off to the left, that's myself. That's Jalissa. Let's see, John, Morgan May. You've had Morgan on.
Big fan.
Yeah, so right there, you're looking at 4 candidates who had filled out the forms, did everything they were supposed to do. Actually, I put my name in. Right, I haven't talked about it, and I wasn't going to do it. But I actually was asked by people down in that county to run because they had no one to pick from. And I didn't want to do it because I thought maybe it would be a conflict of interest in what we're doing. Mm-hmm. But here's how they sold me on it. They said, look, Pete, what if we get 4 seats and we needed 5 and you didn't run? And you've got people down here willing to support you. How are you going to live with yourself? And I went, son of a bitch, they got me. Yep. Anyways, within 2 hours, I had an official agent. I had my signatures. I had everything done, ready to roll. I registered as a candidate, put my paperwork in. I had support from one end of the county to the other, and I had a legitimate good shot at winning that riding. And we couldn't get through the process. And the woman said the same thing to me at the returning office. She said, this is not right, but I've called Halifax and this is what I've got to do. And I have to reject it. And so what happened is that happened all across the province. And then the word started rolling in that we were automatically being rejected. And people that were partway through the process, they just said, well, there's no point completing it. We're already registered, or we're in the process of doing this. We're not going to go through. It's a typical throw your hands in the air. We're going to get screwed over, which we were. But here's the thing about it. Paul's a registered trapper, and so am I. I had a long history of trapping, and I was a wildlife specialist at Natural Resources. And when you deal with DEI hires and you're a trapper, I mean, I'm amazed at how one hand never knows what the other hand seems to be doing, and they stagger into one trap after another. The amount of incompetence that we're coming across is actually staggering. So at least a good old trapper boy like myself thinks that maybe we got a shot here. So one of the other things I want to bring out too that you brought up again, Jason, was the fact that, and this came from a conversation that we had with Brian Peckford, who's just totally dismayed with our court system today and the party system, was that all of us that were willing to run as independents that had been trained inside what our teaching through our society, we're all willing to sign a performance contract with the community where the community would lay out, here's what we want done.
Mm-hmm.
We'd sign that contract. And if we don't live up to these things, we lie, cheat, steal, misrepresent, do any of those things, we're in breach of contract and you can fire us. And we would have loved to gone into this election and challenge the other parties to sign that agreement because they categorically will not sign such an agreement. And like I say, we had 10% of fewer voters turn out. Down here, that's 66,000 people that said, you know what, there's no one to vote for. This is a farce. As a matter of fact, the Nova Scotia government, with their supermajority, are claiming they have a mandate. You don't have a mandate to do anything with 44% voter turnout. I don't care what you want to do. You do not have a mandate. I don't care what you tell us, right? And we'll let the court make a decision on this. We have mountains of evidence, and we're going to let the evidence stand for itself. We're looking forward to February 14th.
February 14th, what happens on there other than it's my birthday? What happens on February 14th?
Well, we started off, I'll just step in there, Peter, if you don't mind. We started off with motion for directions and dates here on December 6th, and one of the candidates, the aggrieved candidates that's a co-applicant to the judicial review, made a request to file a motion for an amendment, which is happening. So that's going to be a hearing to deal with that and introduce new evidence as well. So we have new evidence and we have an amendment to the judicial review. Now, in between then, there's lots of opportunities to do things. But one of the first things we did when we got in the courtroom on the 6th was we requested a summary decision to invalidate the election because we believe that it was invalid. So the judge was good. I mean, he said, well, what's the evidence that you had? And I said, well, the evidence is the election happened. Let's not dispute that. And the Election Act itself, which is the law. So we didn't have to introduce any evidence. We just pointed to the fact that there's a fixed election date on thereabouts around July. The details of the way it's written means that you can float around by a couple of weeks. But it's thereabouts July 25th, 2025. That's when it should have happened. And magically it happened just now because Houston wanted it to. The guy who created the law made sure the law was violated so that he could secure a tactical position, which is exactly what he was railing about when he had the law put in place. Opportunism, right? He didn't want people to exploit, the calendar year, et cetera, and the emotions of the people on various issues too. Well, he did exactly that. The guy is a sick psychopath who hates Nova Scotians and used the circumstances while violating Section 29A to make sure that he could get done what he's got to get done for people who don't even live here. That's what happened. It was brutal. It was brutal.
And on February 14th, are you expected to go back in?
February 14th, we're going to be in court again, and it's part of this judicial procedure mechanism, which is, takes time and everything, but we're in for the long game. You see, mm-hmm. I see this as a problem that's been around for a couple of 100 years. And as I was saying, you have to let the people of Nova Scotia know that the dam broke, rather than say, well, the dam's going to break, oh yeah, sure. Yeah. We'll worry about that someday. I'm more of a guy that says, look, the dam broke and your house is flooded and, we had a loss of life. And now we got to deal with the fact that there was no mechanism to deal with the dam that was in the process of failing. So we had to do that. There's no way around it. So Premier Houston, because he's crazy, a psychopath and he's working for other people, doing stuff that we don't want, he's going to facilitate the discontent. I'm relying on him to do exactly the way God made his mind.
Right.
He's so sick and twisted, and he is a psychopath, and he thinks what he's doing is exactly what he wants done. But he doesn't understand there's like this cancer inside his head that's making him do these things. Well, I'm relying on that, and you just do a good job there, Timmy boy, and piss everybody off, because we'll have these laws fixed by that time, and things will work out well for the people of Nova Scotia. They will have a more representative population of MLAs in the legislature. Thank you very much. I'm looking into your future.
And then what are your thoughts about getting involved on the federal level? It may not be directly able to help Nova Scotia, the provincial government side of things. And you got some work to do there. You got a couple more years of work to do there. Maybe you can get an election sooner. Maybe the remedy from this judge will be that the election will happen in July when it should have happened, and then you get another election. Who knows? But for now, have you considered federal level, whether it's independent or getting involved in a party like the PPC, who has candidates out in Nova Scotia? Have you considered getting in that? And the reason why I'm going to bring this up, many Canadians kind of forget the history of the CPC party itself, Conservative Party of Canada. It actually came from the Reform Party, which came out of the West. So Preston Manning in the late 80s created the Reform Party, got a lot of support. In 93, after Mulroney took a dump in the bed and really messed things up, put Kim Campbell in place and had an election in 93, the Conservative Party, or PC Party at that time, which sounds familiar because that's what you guys have in Nova Scotia, went from a majority government down to 2 seats in one election. The Reform Party then picked up a whole bunch, 52, then 60 in the next one, and eventually kind of reached an impasse because it was heavy left or heavy west. If there was another movement similar to that wasn't West only, but it was a national movement, much like the PPC, and there was a large support from the East and the West, the Reform Party, which became the Canadian Alliance Party, would have continued to grow, and the PC Party would have dissolved. It would have been gone. But instead, because there was only left support for the Canadian Alliance, they merged with the devil. They merged with the PCs and brought them in. And, you know, the old games that they play behind closed doors, eventually the CPC became the party that we were fighting against all along. I'm bringing this up because Canadians kind of forget their history. They think there's only a 2-party system. We're never going to be able to change it, and all this other stuff about another new party happening. They forget it's very possible, and even in one election, you can see tremendous change. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because I see, in my mind, on a federal level, this is going to happen again. CPC is likely going to win. There's a lot of talk about supermajority, and if they do not come out strong and head towards the right, I think we may see another 1993 in 2029 at the election after that, because they're basically going to be handed so much power that they better do it right. But we know Pierre already. We've seen the CPC already. They are very woke. They have a lot of globalist leaning. They definitely seem to be lockstep around the world with this globalist agenda. So I do expect them to kind of fall on their face, much like you're expecting Tim Houston to do as well, fall on his face. And then when they do, what's going to be there to pick up the pieces? Well, I think another right-leaning party is going to be positioned for that. I put all of that on the table because we've done this in Canada, even within my lifetime. And I think we can do it again. History can repeat itself, replace the problem. And right now, I think that's going to be the CPC on a federal level and a PC on your provincial level. Have you considered maybe getting more involved, because the election is less than a year away, maybe sooner, on a federal level? And there's a chance both of you gentlemen could actually become, or at least one of you, become an MP out of Nova Scotia, which may then help bring some of this sovereignty back to the provincial level if you're working on a federal level as well. Because that's my commitment to Parkland. As a MP, I'm going to be Alberta first. I'm going to bring forward initiatives to help Alberta. So I'm just going to put that out there because there is an opportunity to put on more candidates out of the East for the PPC party. Let's go to you, Peter, and see what your thoughts are on that.
my initial thoughts are, I just want to go hunting and fishing.
Yeah, but we got a calling. We got to fix things.
That's my initial thought. But it's like
Mhm.
the guys down in Inverness County, they said, well, what if you don't do it? So
Right.
what Canada has to look at is right now, okay, so basically the coward of the county, probably one of the most embarrassing politicians next to Trudeau in Canadian history is Jagmeet Singh, whose word means less than Justin Trudeau's. By the way, I want to make a point out. You said what else is going to happen on February 14th? Very likely Justin Trudeau is going to make love to everybody from coast to coast Canada. And you can interpret that term so we don't get kicked off, right? So,
Gotcha.
So anyways, if there were enough independents across Canada, and they could think you don't need a bunch, look at what the NDP have been able to do. Now, in this next election, I can tell you that a supermajority is never a good thing. A supermajority in Nova Scotia allows Tim Houston to change the rules of the House. And none of those rules are going to be to the benefit for independents or a benefit of the people of Nova Scotia. The people of Nova Scotia need to get themselves limbered up and start doing some exercises so they can bend over and hold their ankles, right? Because what's coming from the Houston government's not going to be good. He still has a stated written goal of bringing in another 25,000 immigrants annually. That'll be another million. Another 100,000. And there's no homes for them. We grew up down here. There was never a tent city. There was hardly even food banks. Down here in Halifax right now, it is just driving in traffic is an absolute disaster. I was talking to a person the other day who's involved with the stoplight functions in the city. And they said, Pete, how much do you think traffic is up? And I said, well, with all the construction and the amount of additional drivers and stuff, must be 70, 80%. He said, no, congestion is up in the last 4 years, 300%.
Wow.
How does that happen when there's no jobs, right? And everybody's, the price of buying a house up here has basically doubled in the last 4 years. So none of the policies that the province had brought in, I mean, we look at a premier down here that ran on healthcare, just so that, you know, Jason, down here, we still, out of 1 million people, we have 160,000 people that still don't have doctors, more than when he came into power the first time. And somehow he got voted back in. So we started strategically breaking down the numbers and looking at things and saying, okay, something here is not adding up. And I only say that because I did law enforcement for a long time, and I'm a fairly adept investigator. But we have a team of investigators now. That's all they do for us. They volunteer to investigate. And that's why all those people are coming to us saying, look, elections Nova Scotia needs to be investigated. Straight up. So,
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, but I mean, as far as running as federally as an independent, down in this neck of the woods, it is that's a very difficult but not unsurmountable challenge, because people vote generationally in many cases. But we've got a new group of people coming up, and that's why we had such a low voter turnout, because the number one thing that we heard and saw on social media, who are we going to vote for? There's no one to vote for. What's the point? All wings of the same bird. They're going to do the exact same thing when they get in. And Tim Houston knew that, planned on it, and then, like I said, broke his word to everybody in Nova Scotia and Canada, basically saying, by the way, if you're going to negotiate with me as a premier, I break my own legislation. I don't just break my word, I break my own legislation.
Yeah.
And I don't even blink about doing it. Look you in the eye, lie, go do it. So if we can get enough independence federally, I don't know if a year out is enough time, but when people are upset, look what happened when Jack Layton almost won, right? My dad, my whole life said the NDP, they're never going to be in power. They can make all the promises they want because they're never going to be in power. Well, Jack Layton changed that perception of what can be done when people get upset enough. And people were upset enough saying, okay, so here's what's happening. What are we going to do to fix it? So the opportunity to make change, Jason, has never been better.
I agree with that sentiment completely, and especially in places like Nova Scotia, Alberta, even parts of BC, you're seeing a real big push for independent-minded candidates coming forward to fight for the people. A real big push, and I'm super excited about that. Now, I did make the change over to the PPC recently, but the only reason why I did is because I have a commitment that I'm still independent. I get to carry forward my independent into the party. I the party has a leader. I don't have a leader. I actually have a partner. I have somebody that I can use as a resource in Max, but he doesn't control me. There's no whip, and they're allowing me to continue to be the way I always have been. And I don't even like using the word allow because they're not granting it to me. They've accepted me who I am, as I am, which is very independent. So this is the only reason I actually made that change. If it was still more like a regular party, I wouldn't have gotten involved in it. But this is something very different going on with the PPC here. Paul, have you looked into that a little bit? I know you're very provincially focused, but for me to make that change, I did my research. I did have my interviews. I spoke to them, and I was very comfortable with being a member within that group, but I'm still independent.
Yeah, I did. In fact, in our community, I know a couple of the principal actors with the PPC. I won't name them.
Some founding members and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't want to shame them by letting them know they know me.
Sure.
So we have conversations. I'm not an ideologue to the extent that I won't listen to other things. And let's say if the Progressive Conservative Party or the Liberal Party adopted everything that the independent initiative, our society, would like, well, then I wouldn't care, because a rose by any other name would smell as sweet.
Mm-hmm.
And to a certain extent, you've done that. So in my view, the PPC has adopted my idea. Now, it's not my idea. It's an idea that was floating out there for the last 50, 100 years, right? So it's not my idea, but they adopted that idea, and that's why we didn't form a party. We formed an initiative society because we're promoting an idea alone. And the idea is autonomy in terms of your representation for your community, which is the exact opposite of what the conventional parties do. Mm-hmm. Now, if the PPC can restrain themselves at the executive levels, now this is going to be a test, right? And I bet you and I are going to have a chat in about a year and a half, let's say, when the PPC may institutionalize things and say, you can't do this and you can't do that, and then you're going to have a run-in. For example, there's a group here in Nova Scotia, and it's called Civis. And it's run by a fellow by the name of Martin Broadman. And I think it was well-intentioned. And I criticized him, in a very friendly way, that he isn't going to make any progress with it because in order to get the idea out there, he's going to have dictatorial control over what his concept is. So anyway, time passed, and the idea was that you have members of the community participating as basically a watchdog and a contributor at the municipal level. Really, that's what it is. And one of the things that they did, which is anathema to me, and that is they came out with this list of statement of principles. And there you go. There you go. You got the Chinese Communist Party leaking in, or the WEF telling you what to think and how to go about your business. You see? That's my advice to you. If you're participating with the PPC, you have to keep your eyes open for these funny little things, these NGOs and these ideas that leak in and say, oh, we have these statements of principles. You can't criticize other people. You have to regulate your speech because, you might insult one of the members of our community. Things like that. That really happened in Civis. So Martin's going around trying to be this grand person who's, promoting this wonderful idea, which I didn't actually dislike. I liked it. But now he's poisoned it with the statement of principles, and God knows where that came from. And that's where PPC is going to have a hard time. Because they're going to become a big organization, controls are going to have to come in, and the clamps are going to come down on people. Just like it happened when the Reform Party joined up with the Conservatives.
Correct. And I think that was a big mistake of the Reform Party to do that.
Yep.
But Reform Party found themselves in a bit of a pickle. They wouldn't be able to get out of official opposition and form government if they didn't expand more east of Ontario. So that was the pickle that they found themselves in. And that's why I think PPC's done a smarter start to their party by focusing national and staying national the entire time and doing Canada first and being very populist. Now, we've seen lots of populist movements around the world really take hold and make some change. France, even the UK with Wexit, and then Trump himself is an example of a populist movement. And they're actually taking hold. And what we have found with these movements, and especially when I talk about the provincial constitution for Alberta, the only people who really oppose, the only groups that have power that oppose are corrupt politicians because they'll be exposed, and the globalists because they're going to be stopped. The globalists around the world have conservative parties, labor parties, liberal parties, New Democrat parties. They have all these parties already in the bag. They've been at this for quite some time.
Yep.
But what they don't have in the bag are grassroots populist movements because first, they didn't exist. And they're also not willing to deal with globalists at any way. So when you're giving these warnings about the PPC party in the future, I hear them. I do hear those warnings, and we're also looking for that even now. We're not even waiting till later. These are the things we're looking for now. And one of the things I can say to both of you is I think this is a good time to consider getting involved in the PPC for the exact reason you listed there, Paul. It takes people like you, Peter, myself, Max, others to really lay down a good framework and groundwork so that it doesn't turn into a carbon copy of the CPC, and it doesn't make the same mistakes that the Reform did by allowing that group to come in. If we could eliminate old school, deep-rooted, conservative-based controls, which have been around for like 150 years, they've never died off. If we can remove that, what we'll see happen provincially and federally is an absolute sharp right turn. We're going to go head right back to the right turn. We'll see reform. We'll see revoking laws. We'll see new stuff come in and not the same stuff that we have here. And I'm just going to, before I throw it to you, Peter, the major concern I have right now with Pierre, and I've been getting a lot of, flack online about this, is right now the Liberal government just came out with a new gun ban. Okay, another order in council. These guys, they have a printing press of orders in council, and they just came out with a new ban. A whole bunch of Canadians became potential criminals if they don't comply with the seizing of their property in the near future. So this is tyrannical. This didn't even go through the houses. This is just an order from our great supreme leader. But we're not hearing the Conservative Party fight against that, specifically Pierre. So I came out and I said, hey, Pierre, I would like to hear you be strong on property rights, which would include gun rights, and really let us know where you're going to go with this if you become our leader. And everybody's telling me to shut up, don't ruffle the boat, don't rock the boat, because we need him to win no matter what. But my concern here, Peter, is if he's going to pander to the moderate left who would be scared away from voting for him if he takes a strong stance against or for gun rights and property rights. If he's got to pander now to win the election, two things I have a problem with. One, he's weak because he shouldn't have to pander to any group to win. Maybe he should be stronger. And two, if he gets in through pandering, he's going to have to maintain that pandering so he stays in. I don't think he's thinking one term. I don't think he's thinking I'm going to get in there and then make radical changes back to the right. I think he's going to do what every other Conservative leader did, including Harper, which was the first CPC leader after the merger with the Reform Party. He's going to come in with promises like revoking the Firearms Act, and then don't. He just revoked a piece of it, the registration of firearms or long guns, and then call it a win. My concern is if he panders to a group, he's going to have to continue to pander. And if he's already sending us the message that he's soft on things like property rights, well, then we're not really going to see much. We're going to see liberal light take over. And just like with Tim Houston and what Paul said, well, he's going to fall on his face, and then we'll pick up the pieces later. But what are your thoughts about Pierre? Do you think he's going to be strong on property rights? And do you think it's wrong for someone like me, who's not even in the House of Commons, I don't have a vote cast against me, to be holding the provincial leader responsible at this stage? Or should I just shut up and see what he does when he's elected? Because that's what I'm being told to do.
Well, for starters, I'm not much of being told to do anything by anybody. That's caused me a lot of problems over my lifetime. Anyway,
sure.
so the issue is on a scale of 1 to 10, in the next federal election, people got a couple of choices. So they've got Jagmeet Singh on a scale of 1 to 10, who's about a 0.5 to maybe 0.7. Then you've got Trudeau, he's about a 1.5, and you've got Pierre, who's about a 5. Nobody's ideal. The problem is, in the next upcoming election, we cannot continue at the current rate that we've been in with Justin Trudeau, because our economy, our entire way of life is being systematically, totally crushed. I'm hoping that I don't want to see a party wiped out. I wouldn't mind them seeing 1 or 2 seats, right? But that's what people are going to be faced with in the upcoming election. So do you pick the 5, the 1.5, or the 0.5? So straight up, we don't have a choice in this particular case, but you can expect to be Pierre Poilievre to be the end-all, wear-all. And why I can tell you that, as president of an EDA of the Federal Conservative Party, I could tell you categorically that Pierre Poilievre does not run the party. There's a group behind the scenes that will tell him what he'll be doing and when he'll be doing it. And there's a reason why, I met with him privately when he was down here prior to the last election. There was a group, I think 8 of us in boardroom. And I brought up an issue of corruption. And what it was people inside the party that were in key positions. And at the same time, they were involved in the lobbying industry, and some of them were lobbying for Big Pharma. And I asked him to deal with it. And he looked at me and he went, basically, who are you? I explained what I'd been doing, right? I'm an EDA president and stuff. And I said, this is a simple fix. All you have to do is say there can be no lobbyists inside National Council or anybody in an advisory capacity to me, should I become prime minister. You can't be a lobbyist. And all I can tell you is he didn't do it.
Yep.
But when you've got to look at that on the big scale, we've got Justin Trudeau, who's just doing this with firearms. Now, Pierre Poilievre, my understanding is all he has to do is not sign on to the UN agreement that they put in place on firearms, because it's the UN pushing this agenda. And nobody will stand up to anybody other than Donald Trump, who's talking about pulling out of the UN. It's not going to happen here in Canada. So, and here's, everybody looks, they make calculated decisions based on numbers. Are there enough people being affected inside the community, firearms community, that will change swing votes in a seat? And the answer is no. So they're trying to, win favor in areas in the city that people are just woefully uninformed. I'll give you an example, Jason, how uninformed some folks are in regards to politics. Down here in Nova Scotia, probably half of the province still doesn't know that the Progressive Conservative Party under Tim Houston has completely and formally disconnected itself from any association with the Federal Conservative Party. He was in the newspaper 3 different times. I just saw the look on your face. You didn't know that.
Yeah, no.
When Poilievre comes to town, he doesn't talk with Tim Houston. Tim Houston literally, prior to this election, in the last federal election, threw the Federal Conservative Party right under the bus. And he does that with anybody who stands up against him. Then he drives over them, backs over them, and spins the tires on them as he's leaving.
Wow.
So he's straight up. He said, he'll come right out. He said, whoa, we have nothing to do with the Conservative Party. Don't confuse us. But in this election, he didn't do that. He made a point of not disassociating himself this time, because he capitalized on the absolute detestation of Justin Trudeau in Atlantic Canada. To be honest with you, I've never seen a more despised politician I'm 66. I've never seen a more despised politician in my life. That's anywhere in the world. I'm talking about tyrants that people have lined against a wall and shot later on, right? So that's what we're dealing with down here.
Yeah, and we're not that bad here in Alberta, but we certainly have concerns because we're being let down on a conservative level as well. There's a lot of CNOs, conservatives in name only, all over this country. They use the name, but they're not conservative. I wish there was some sort of test that you had to take, but the test is your actions. So when you get in there and do things, we pay close attention to that, and then your actions speak louder than your words. There's a lot of CNOs. Conservative in name only. So before we jump over to the members area, which we're going to head over to right away, Paul, do you want to have anything else that you want to say to Canadians in public? And then we're going to get to some questions in our members area.
Sure. I am happy to be on your show, and I'm also happy to engage with you relative to this nuance within the PPC relative to having a degree of autonomy inside your
Hmm.
own constituencies. So, because of that, the principle behind the Independent Nova Scotia Initiative, which is one of the reasons I'm here and why we're in court fighting for this, is that the people of Canada, the people of Nova Scotia in particular, need to carry some weight. They need to carry the weight of their own decisions and participate in their local politics. Find somebody that they love in their own communities that they trust, get behind them, help them get elected, and then have a direct relationship with that person once they're in the legislature so that the people can guide them in their governance. And once we have that relationship established, it's going to be very tough to do in Canada to get the people of Canada to habituate themselves to be more active and direct in the management of their own governance. That's what we want to achieve. That's the last thing, the first thing I want to say. It's the last thing I want to say. People, you need to be involved in your governance. And the only way that you can do that, excuse me, Jason, is to dispense with parties and to get independents operating contractually for you and have your ideas represented in the various assemblies.
Yeah, I do like Peckford's plan there, and Peckford does support Max with the PPC because he does see how that is a path forward as well. And I love his idea about the contract with Canadians. That was something I looked at as an independent as well, and I really am for that. And that's still on the table for me. So when I meet potential voters, I make a commitment to them that if they're going to put their faith into me with their vote, I expect them to hold me accountable for it. Canadians are very quick to say, I have rights. They do. But they also have rights and responsibilities. They forget that second part, that responsibilities part. And that means show up to vote. That means take your time and look who the candidate is. That means put your vote where you believe it needs to be, that lines with your principles and values. Don't focus on the parties. Vote on the candidate. And that's part of the responsibility is also after the vote is to hold them accountable, to make sure that you stay involved in that. And this is why we are very active in reaching out to non-voters or never voters, because those are the people who are not using the power that they have. So I say to Canadians and Albertans, you have rights and responsibilities. And part of that responsibility is to get active in the process. If you don't, you really can't complain. And a lot of what we've seen over the last 20 years even is, I think, a disconnect of the people to the system, and they don't realize that their responsibilities are very important. They really need to execute on that side of things. So whether it's an independent, a party, or even a legacy party, I still want all people to take their responsibility and do that. Look at the candidate. Don't vote the party. And the party may be over, and we can still do that with parties if the main message is don't vote the party, vote the candidate. And if they align with your values and your principles, then that's the right vote for you. So Peter, before we jump over to the members area, you're going to get the last word. What are your thoughts about that? Rights and responsibilities. Canadians really need to do both. Oh, sorry, I muted you. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's what happened down here, Jason, was 56% of Nova Scotians. Now, don't get me wrong, some of them, it was a show of non-support for the government by not showing, because a lot of people said, there's no one to vote for, I'm not going to vote for them. And if we get enough people who didn't vote, now you don't have a mandate. I don't care what Tim Houston says, he doesn't have a mandate based on those numbers. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So, but people do need to get involved. I 100% endorse what Paul said. The only reason that they convinced me to do it because I had enough support in an area. Said, if you run, we'll help you. I'm willing to sign an agreement. Here's what I'll do. You get me on nominated, and I'll do an agreement with you. And if I don't do what I say I'm going to do, you can fire me. And actually, people don't realize what a breakthrough that would be in politics, because there is a legal case called the Little Child case that no politician in Canada is responsible to the voter from the day they get elected. They legally cannot be held responsible for any decisions that they make. You cannot hold them responsible. It's called the Little Child case. I think it was in 1993. It might have been 1991. And a community tried to sue a politician who lied to them. And the courts ruled in Canada, you cannot be held responsible. The only way you can be responsible is every 4 years when it's election time. Well, our goal is to change that. And that actually would be the model for all parliamentary and Republican, or not Republic, but federal republic systems worldwide, if we could get it initiated here. That was critical, and it's spelled out in my book, and anybody could read it. And I'm sure Tim Houston did, and said, we need to put a stop to this. Let's break our own law and bring in an early election.
Well, one solution to that is something we spoke about, which is the provincial constitution, because that becomes the supreme law, and it does come above case law. So if your provincial constitution said in these events they lie, they break the law, they do something wrong, recall could be triggered immediately. So you could make those fixes to your governance through the provincial constitution. Yeah, and then it does put it supreme over case law from previous, and even over statutes and bill. It's higher up on the supremacy of that. So it can fix the system. It's one of the things. But hang on, we're going to jump over to the members area, and we'll expand on this a little bit more because we have some questions for you gentlemen as well. Yeah. So public, hang out, members hang out, and two gentlemen hang out. We'll be there a second. Public. If you want to join us on the members area, you can go to levineshow.com, get yourself started. And remember that you can also get assistance if the price is an issue for you. You can send us an email at members@thelevineshow.com. Paula will get you your preferred pricing and get you all set up. Any tech issues, any questions, Paula will assist you there as well. And if email is not your thing, you can phone us at 587-673-9955. She'd be more than happy to assist you there. This is how we keep the show going. And if you want to support independent journalism, we have a membership, so you can do that. Public, have yourself a wonderful day. Thanks for hanging out with us. Make sure you share this. If you're in Nova Scotia, did you know the whole bunch of independents were not allowed to be on the ballot? Why? What are they afraid of? Why not just have them on the ballot, see what happens? They're very afraid of independence. Paul and Peter are absolutely right. This is how we fight back the system without having to tear it down. We make sure that the right people can get in there. So if the system's fighting against those people, then we have to bring the fight back to them. So great job, gentlemen, taking it to the courts, judicial review. Keep up the fight. Public, make sure you take care of yourself and your family, and you shake the hand of a neighbor or a stranger, especially if they're independent out in Nova Scotia, trying to get some things done. Shake their hand. And why do I keep reminding you about this? Is because I love you all very much, and God bless.
Warning: member videos may contain confidential information about ongoing legal proceedings. Unauthorized publication, distribution, or broadcasting